Imagine this. For the last 50 years, women were absolutely convinced that men were biologically hardwired to chase them forever. No matter how badly they were treated, no matter how many rules changed, no matter how much the goalposts moved. They genuinely believed that a man's desire for female attention, for intimacy, for legacy through children was so overpowering that he would eat any amount of disrespect, shoulder any burden, and keep coming back with his wallet open and his head bowed. They thought men were prisoners to their own nature, and that all a woman had to do was exist, and the world would keep spinning in her favor. But right now, in real time, millions of men have quietly made a different choice. They looked at the contract being offered, tore it up, walked away, and discovered something women never thought possible: a life of peace, purpose, and genuine happiness without a woman in it. And the wildest part? Those same men are never coming back. Stay with me until the end, because I'm going to show you exactly how we got here, why the reversal is permanent, and what happens to a society when the people who built it and protected it finally say enough is enough. If you're new here or you've been riding with me for a while, smash that like button right now. Share this video with every man you know who needs to hear the truth, and hit subscribe so you never miss another dose of raw, unfiltered angry guy content. And listen, if you want to bulletproof your finances, learn exactly how to buy, sell, and trade cryptocurrency the right way, and protect everything you've worked for from the coming storm, go check out Angry's Crypto Academy. The link is in the description. Thousands of men are already in there stacking skills and stacking coins while the world burns. Click it right now. Thank me later. Also, if these videos fire you up and keep you sharp, you can buy me a Red Bull through the link below. Keeps me caffeinated and keeps the truth coming. Let's go back to the beginning, because this story didn't start yesterday. This story started the moment the first wave of modern feminism told men they were the root of all evil in the world. From the 1970s onward, men were told over and over again that everything wrong in society was because of them. Their natural strength was relabeled toxic. Their natural desire to protect and provide was called patriarchy and control. Their natural way of sitting on a train, legs apart because that's how male hips are built, was given a nasty little name: man spreading. And suddenly politicians were talking about fining men for it. Think about that for a second. A generation of women grew up being taught that normal male behavior was criminal, that male sexuality itself was suspect, that the very presence of a man taking up space was an act of aggression. And the media amplified it every single day. Fast forward a couple of decades, and the message only got louder. Men were told they were unnecessary. Remember the memes that said a woman needs a man like a fish needs a bicycle? Remember the articles that bragged about how women were earning more degrees, making more money in certain cities, and didn't need a man to survive? Remember the celebrity quotes, the talk shows, the TED Talks where women stood on stage and declared they were the table, that a man was lucky to even sit at it. All of that messaging soaked into the culture like water into a sponge, and men heard it. They really heard it. Then the legal system got weaponized. Family courts turned into wealth extraction machines where a man could lose his children, his home, half his income, and still be called a deadbeat if he missed one modified payment. False accusations became a fast track to revenge or profit, and the accusation alone was enough to destroy a career, even if it was proven false years later. Men watched their fathers, their brothers, their friends get dragged through the mud, bankrupted, and in some cases, driven to the absolute edge because they dared to get married or have children inside a system that treated them like disposable utilities. And still, the culture said, man up, be better, do more, give more, apologize for existing. Then social media arrived and turned the volume up to 11. Suddenly, any interaction with a woman in public could be recorded, edited, and posted with a caption that painted the man as a creep, a predator, or worse. Gyms became minefields where a man glancing in the wrong direction for half a second could end up viral with millions of people calling for his head. Dating became a joke where men were expected to spend hundreds of dollars on dinner for a woman who already decided on the appetizer that nothing physical was happening and he was never going to hear from her again. Apps appeared where women could warn each other about men they didn't like, sharing private screenshots, making up stories, destroying reputations with zero accountability. And through all of this, the message never changed. Men were the problem. Men needed to change. Men needed to do better. Men needed to shut up and keep providing. And then something quietly shifted. Men stopped arguing. They stopped trying to prove they weren't the villains in the story. They looked around, saw the pattern, recognized the game for what it was, and simply opted out. No protests, no big public announcements, just millions of individual men making the same private decision. I'm done. They deleted the dating apps. They stopped approaching in public. They stopped simping in comment sections. They stopped sending money to OnlyFans girls who wouldn't spit on them if they were on fire. They stopped caring about being called bitter or insecure or any of the other names that used to work. They walked away. And here's where the story gets interesting because the moment men walked away, they discovered something women never expected: peace. Real, genuine, soul deep peace. For the first time in their adult lives, many men experienced what it felt like to wake up without stress about what some woman was mad about today. They experienced what it was like to have their paycheck stay in their own bank account. They experienced what it was like to spend an entire weekend doing exactly what they wanted without having to negotiate, explain, or apologize for it. They started going to the gym for themselves. They started businesses. They traveled. They built friend groups with other men who were also free. They rediscovered hobbies they had abandoned years ago to keep some girlfriend happy. And the craziest part, they realized they weren't lonely. Being alone and being lonely are not the same thing. And once a man makes peace with himself, once he learns to enjoy his own company, the threat of loneliness loses all its power. Meanwhile, on the other side of the fence, reality started knocking. Rent didn't get cheaper. Groceries didn't magically appear. Inflation didn't care how many followers someone had on Instagram. And suddenly, all those women who spent years bragging that they didn't need a man discovered that a whole lot of their lifestyle was quietly subsidized by male labor, male taxes, male infrastructure, and male willingness to pick up the check. And now that the subsidies are gone, the complaints are flooding in. Every day there's a new TikTok of a woman in her car, makeup running, talking about how she can't afford to live, how dating is dead, how men aren't approaching anymore, how it's not fair that she has to pay her own bills now. Some of them are angry, some of them are crying. A few are starting to realize the role they played in creating the world they're now stuck in. But the one thing they all have in common, they want men to come back and fix it. They want men to start approaching again, start paying again, start protecting again, start providing again. And men are looking at those videos, shaking their heads, and going right back to the life of peace they built without those women in it. Because here's the part most people still don't understand: this isn't a negotiation, this isn't a strike waiting for better offers. This is a permanent shift. The men who walked away aren't sitting at home pining. They're thriving. Their mental health is the best it's been in years. Their bank accounts are growing. Their friend circles are stronger than ever. They sleep like babies because nobody is blowing up their phone with drama at 2 a.m. They have time, money, and energy to pour into themselves. And they finally realized that self respect feels a hell of a lot better than any relationship ever did. And society is starting to feel the ripples. Birth rates are collapsing in every developed country. Marriage rates are in free fall. Home ownership for single men under 40 is actually rising while single women are getting priced out. Companies that targeted women with luxury spending are quietly panicking as the money dries up. And every day, another influencer who built her brand on "I don't need a man" energy discovers that her rent still comes due on the first, and likes don't pay the landlord. This is the story no one was supposed to see coming, but it was inevitable the moment one side of the equation decided the other side was the enemy instead of the partner. Hey guys, in a world pushing you to own nothing and be happy, crypto is your key to survival. Join Angry's Crypto Academy to master buying, selling, and trading crypto. Make huge profits and safeguard your wealth. Plus, discover the one crypto virtually no one is talking about, poised to create new millionaires in the upcoming bull run. The link is in the description of the video below. Go check it out now. Women spend decades telling men exactly what they thought of them, and men finally believe them. They believe them enough to leave. And now the same voices that spent years saying, "We don't need you," are screaming, "Wait, come back," into a void that doesn't answer anymore. Now let's pull the camera back and look at the cold, hard numbers. Because feelings don't pay rent and slogans don't keep the lights on. In the United States alone, the marriage rate has fallen off a cliff. We went from roughly 10 marriages per thousand people in the 1980s to barely 6 today. And it keeps dropping every single year. In some major cities, it's already under 5. That's not a blip, that's a structural collapse. In Japan, South Korea, Italy, Spain, and increasingly across Northern Europe, the numbers are even worse. South Korea just recorded the lowest fertility rate in recorded human history, 0.72 children per woman. That means for every woman alive today, there will be roughly 1/3 of a daughter tomorrow. Entire nations are literally disappearing in front of our eyes, and the people in charge still pretend the problem is that men aren't trying hard enough. Home ownership tells the same story from a different angle. Single men under 40 are now buying houses at the highest rate since they started keeping track. They're not waiting for a wife, they're not pooling money with a girlfriend. They're signing the mortgage papers solo and turning that property into a fortress of solitude. Single women in the same age group, their home ownership rate is plummeting. Why? Because the dual income fantasy only works when there are two incomes and one of those incomes has walked away. The average single woman today is spending over 40% of her income on rent in most major cities, and that number is climbing faster than wages. Meanwhile, the average single man who walked away 5 or 6 years ago has paid down debt, built an emergency fund, and is watching equity stack up while he sleeps. Credit card debt, subscription spending, luxury handbags, cosmetic procedures, all the industries that boomed on the back of female consumer spending are quietly issuing profit warnings. Department stores are closing locations faster than they have since the Great Depression. Companies that built entire marketing departments around girl power purchases are watching their revenue charts bend downward like a sad trombone. And the dating app companies, they're in full panic mode. Stock prices for the big names have been cut in half, then cut in half again, because the men who used to swipe and pay for premium features have deleted the apps and never looked back. The apps responded the way any desperate business does. They made the experience worse for the few men still on there, raised prices, added more paywalls, and then wondered out loud why revenue keeps falling. Let's talk about the labor market for a minute, because this is where it gets brutal. For decades, women entered the workforce in massive numbers and were told this was liberation. And in some ways, it was. They gained financial independence, flexibility, and options. But here's what nobody said out loud: the entire consumer economy was quietly restructured around the assumption that households would soon have two full time incomes instead of one. Rents doubled, then tripled. Daycare became a second mortgage. Cars, phones, insurance, healthcare, everything inflated on the expectation that two people would be paying. When women demanded equal pay, corporations shrugged and gave it to them, then turned around and doubled the cost of living, so the household still needed two checks to survive. The system never intended for women to get ahead. It intended to make sure everyone had to work harder just to stay in place. Now take half those second incomes off the table. Take millions of men who used to say, "Sure, I'll cover the bigger rent so you can chase your dreams," and replace them with men who say, "Cool, good luck with that rent." Suddenly the math doesn't work anymore. A one-bedroom apartment that used to be covered by one man's overtime is now supposed to be covered by one woman's salary. And the numbers just laugh at her. And the wild part is that most women still don't see the connection. They still think the problem is inflation or corporate greed or the landlord, never once considering that the lifestyle they were sold was never sustainable on one income to begin with. Mental health numbers are even more telling. Male depression and substance issues actually started trending downward for the first time in decades the moment large numbers of men went their own way. Therapists who used to see man after man broken by divorce, cheating, false allegations, or endless criticism are now reporting empty schedules. Men aren't in crisis anymore. They're in the gym, in the garage, on the mountain, at the lake, anywhere but in a toxic relationship. Female depression diagnoses, on the other hand, are spiking so hard that even the corporate media can't hide it anymore. Prescriptions for antidepressants among women under 40 have doubled in less than 10 years. Therapy apps that target women are some of the only tech companies still seeing explosive growth. The happiness gap between single men and single women has flipped completely. 10 years ago, single women reported higher life satisfaction than single men in almost every study. Today, single men are reporting the highest life satisfaction of any demographic group, while single women have fallen to the bottom of the happiness rankings in almost every Western country. And the birth rate collapse is the final nail. This isn't just about fewer babies, it's about the complete breakdown of the intergenerational wealth transfer that every civilization has ever relied on. Old age pensions, Social Security, Medicare, all of it was built on the assumption that each generation would have more workers than retirees. When you drop below 2.1 children per woman, the pyramid inverts. In 20 years, there will be more people collecting benefits than paying into the system. And the people who were supposed to be having those kids are instead arguing on social media about who should approach whom first. Every day, another video goes viral of a woman in her mid to late 20s or early 30s staring into her ring light, voice cracking, saying things like, I did everything right. I got the degree. I got the job. I waited for the right guy, and now there's nobody left. And the comments are brutal because men have finally stopped caring about being polite. They just write, cool story, still not coming back, and keep scrolling. The empathy well is dry. The trust is gone. The social contract was shredded, and men aren't interested in taping it back together with duct tape and promises. Look at the dating statistics if you want to feel this in your bones. In 2018, roughly 65% of men under 30 reported being in a relationship. Today, that number is under 40% and still falling. Women's relationship numbers haven't moved much because a small percentage of high value men are still dating multiple women, which keeps the female statistic artificially high. But the majority of women are now competing for a tiny pool of men who actually want to play the game. And those men have raised their standards into the stratosphere because they no longer need a woman to feel complete. The average man today would rather be single than settle, and he finally has the resources and the self respect to make that choice stick. The passport bro phenomenon is just one visible symptom. Millions of men are quietly relocating to countries where women haven't been taught to treat men like enemies. They're learning new languages, building businesses abroad, and dating women who still smile when a man opens a door. And the women back home call them losers for leaving, while simultaneously crying that there are no good men left. The irony is so thick you need a chainsaw to cut it. Universities are another leading indicator. Female enrollment is still high, but male enrollment has been dropping for years. In some countries, men now make up less than 40% of college students. Trades are booming, coding boot camps are packed. Entrepreneurship among young men is exploding. Men are choosing paths that maximize freedom and income while minimizing dependence on institutions that hate them. And the beauty of it is that most of these paths don't require marriage, don't require children, and don't require putting up with nonsense from anyone. The government response has been predictable: panic. Politicians are floating ideas like tax penalties for single men, mandatory dating apps, even government funded sperm banks to keep birth rates from flatlining. They still think this is a problem that can be solved with incentives or force. They don't understand that the men who walked away aren't negotiating. You can't tax a man into wanting to come home to a woman who despises him. You can't shame a man into raising children in a system that lets the mother take them away on a whim. You can't threaten a man into giving up the first peace he's ever known. And the clock is ticking louder every day. In less than 15 years, the first wave of women who fully bought the "I don't need a man" message will hit retirement age with no savings, no partner, no children, and a government that's already broke. The same women who spent their 20s and 30s traveling, brunching, and collecting handbags will be competing for Section 8 housing and cat food. And the men they spent decades telling to get lost will be retired on a beach somewhere, sipping something cold, wondering why their phone isn't ringing. This is what happens when one half of society spends 50 years telling the other half they're worthless, and the other half finally says, okay, now let's get into the specific lies that were sold to an entire generation of women, because this is where the rubber meets the road and the story turns tragic in slow motion. From the time they were little girls, women were fed a fairy tale that went something like this: get your education, climb the corporate ladder, live your best life in your 20s, travel the world, sleep with whoever you want, collect experiences like handbags, and then, right around the time you decide you're ready, usually somewhere between 32 and 38, the perfect high value man will magically appear. He'll be tall, handsome, emotionally available, make six figures, minimum, preferably seven, have no baggage, love your independence, and be ready to wife you up immediately with a ring that costs 3 months of his salary. And because you're a queen, you deserve nothing less. That was the script. That was the promise printed on every magazine cover, baked into every rom com, screamed from every influencer account with a ring light and a Starbucks cup. You can have it all, just not all at once. Focus on your career first. The man will wait. And millions of women believed it with religious fervor. They postponed marriage, postponed children, postponed any kind of serious commitment because they were told their value only went up with time. They were told the sexual marketplace was like wine: men aged like milk, women aged like fine Bordeaux. They were told that a woman at 35 with a master's degree and a management title was infinitely more attractive than the same woman at 24 working retail. They were told that men would always be lining up no matter how many partners she had before, no matter how much debt she carried, no matter how confrontational or difficult she became. And for a brief window in the late 1990s and early 2000s, it almost looked true. The economy was booming. Men were still raised with the traditional programming that said, find a good woman and build a life. And the first waves of women riding the career track were still young enough that the biological clock hadn't started screaming yet. A 35-year-old corporate woman in 2005 could still pull a decent man who was willing to overlook the attitude, the body count, and the student loans because he had been taught his entire life that marriage was his job, his duty, his purpose. But biology is not a social construct. Fertility is not negotiable. And male desire does not follow corporate feminist talking points. By the time the Instagram era hit full stride around 2015 to 2016, the men coming of age had watched their fathers get destroyed in divorce court. They had watched their older brothers get cheated on and cleaned out. They had watched their friends get accused of things they didn't do because a girl got mad. And most importantly, they had the internet. They could see the same girl posting, "I don't need a man" on Monday and crying, "Where are all the good men" on Thursday. They could see the dating app statistics that showed the top 10% of men getting 90% of the attention while the average guy got zero. They could see the hypocrisy in real time And they did what every previous generation of men had never been able to do. They compared notes globally, instantly, and anonymously. The red pill communities, the manosphere, the whatever you want to call it spaces, didn't create the walkaway movement. They simply gave men language for what they were already seeing with their own eyes. Hypergamy doesn't care about your feelings. Women date across and up in every measurable category: height, income, education, social status, physical attractiveness, always have, always will. The difference now is that men finally admitted it out loud and decided they weren't going to play a game where the rules only applied to one team. And here's where the story turns brutal for the women who bought the lie. The wall is real and it's undefeated. Female fertility starts declining at 30, accelerates after 35, and falls off a cliff after 40. That's not misogyny, that's biology. Eggs don't care about your promotion or your passport stamps. And male attraction follows fertility cues, whether we like it or not. A man might date a woman in her late 30s or early 40s for fun, but the overwhelming majority of men who are serious about marriage and children want a woman under 35, preferably under 30. That's not opinion. That's every dating app data leak ever published, every census marriage record, every fertility clinic waiting room on planet Earth. So now we have millions of women hitting their mid to late 30s realizing that the prince they were promised isn't coming. The men their age who are single are either the ones nobody wanted in the first place or the ones who looked at the deal and chose peace instead. The high value men they were waiting for are either already married to younger women or they're dating multiple younger women and have zero intention of settling down with someone who spent her prime years treating men like disposable entertainment. And the coping begins. You've seen the videos. I'm 36 and men are intimidated by my success. No, you make 80 grand a year and you're 40 pounds overweight with the personality of a wet cat. That's not intimidation, that's standards. Men my age only want younger women. Yes, because those younger women haven't spent 15 years marinating in resentment and entitlement. I just want a good man who accepts me as I am. Translation: I want a man who ignores the red flags I spent a decade planting and pays full price for damaged goods. The cruelty of the situation is that many of these women genuinely did everything they were told to do. They followed the script, they got the degree, they got the job, they lived their truth, and now they're staring at an empty apartment and a cat wondering where it all went wrong. And the answer is painful but simple. The script was a lie. The people who sold it to them, professors, media, older women who got theirs before the rules changed, knew it was a lie, or at the very least didn't care about the collateral damage. They got their liberation, their careers, their no fault divorces, and they left the next generation holding the bag. Meanwhile, the men who were told they were toxic for wanting a traditional relationship, who were told their standards were unrealistic, who were told they were creeps for approaching women in public, those same men are now 35, debt free, jacked, with a paid off truck and a brokerage account that's compounding nicely. They're hiking Machu Picchu with their boys. They're opening businesses in Thailand. They're restoring classic cars in their garages. And they have zero interest in rescuing a woman who spent her 20s telling men exactly where they could go. And the shaming language no longer works. Call a man a loser for not wanting to wife up a 38-year-old single mom with a master's in gender studies and 3 cats. He'll just laugh and keep scrolling. Tell him he's scared of a strong woman. He'll send you a screenshot of his deadlift PR and his dividend income. Tell him he'll die alone. He'll send you a photo from the lake house he bought cash with the money he didn't spend on dates and daycare. The power dynamic has inverted completely, and women are only now starting to feel it. For the first time in 50 years, women are the ones sending paragraph texts that get left on read. Women are the ones double texting. Women are the ones lowering their standards and still getting no response. Women are the ones making TikToks asking, how do I get him to commit? While men are making TikToks showing their breakfast view from a balcony in Colombia. And the best part, men aren't angry anymore. That's what women still don't get. This isn't a tantrum. This isn't bitterness. The men who walked away aren't sitting in basements plotting revenge. Hard times are here. Jobs are disappearing fast. And if you lose yours, you could be homeless in a few months or even a few weeks. But it doesn't have to be that way. Check out Angry's Creator Academy and learn how to build your own online business using YouTube to grow it. And get the free creator blueprint when you sign up. The link's in description below. Go check it out now. They're genuinely happier than they've ever been. They fix their diet, fix their finances, fix their circle, and remove the one variable that was causing 90% of their stress: modern Western women. The anger phase lasted maybe 6 months for most guys. Then came acceptance, then peace, then thriving. Women expected men to stay in the anger phase forever because anger is something they could still control. Angry men still care. Angry men can be shamed. Angry men will eventually come crawling back if you ignore them long enough. But peaceful men, happy men, men who wake up every day grateful they don't have to deal with drama, accusations, or entitlement, those men are untouchable. You can't negotiate with a man who wants nothing from you. You can't shame a man who no longer seeks your validation. You can't guilt a man who has everything he needs and nothing to lose. That's the real red pill. Not hate, not resentment, freedom. And now we zoom out even further and watch this wave roll across the planet like a slow motion tsunami. Because what started in the West is no longer contained to the West. The internet broke the seal. A 25-year-old guy in Romania, Poland, Colombia, Thailand, or the Philippines can open his phone and see exactly what's happening to men in America, Canada, the UK, and Australia. He can watch the same divorce court horror stories, the same false accusation videos, the same entitled TikToks, and he can make a decision in real time. Do I want that future or do I want something else? And millions of men in every corner of the globe are looking at the evidence and choosing something else. Eastern Europe is already years ahead of the curve. Birth rates in Poland, Hungary, and Romania are scraping the bottom, and young men there watched what happened when their countries rushed to adopt Western feminist talking points after the Soviet collapse. They saw the divorce rate spike, the family courts turn hostile, the culture shift to independent women don't need men, and they collectively said no thanks. Walk down the street in Warsaw or Budapest today, and you will see beautiful, feminine, pleasant women in their early 20s openly complaining that the men their age refuse to commit, refuse to spend money, refuse to play the provider game. Polished guys in their 20s are some of the most red pilled humans on earth right now. They watched their fathers get cleaned out in the 2000s and they decided the juice is not worth the squeeze. Latin America is following the same trajectory on a 5 to 10 year delay. Medellin, Sao Paulo, Buenos Aires. Cities that used to be legendary for warm, family oriented women are now producing English speaking, Instagram influenced women who quote the same high value woman talking points we heard in Miami 5 years ago. And the local men are already adapting. They see the writing on the wall. They're lifting, stacking money, learning game that works on tourists instead of locals, and quietly building exit strategies. Give it another decade, and the passport bro destinations everyone brags about today will have the exact same problems everyone is running from because the virus travels through Wi Fi now. Southeast Asia is the last domino standing, but cracks are already showing. Thailand, Vietnam, and the Philippines still have massive cultural advantages, traditional values, family orientation, lower obesity, feminine energy. But TikTok is in every village now. Young women in Manila and Ho Chi Minh City are watching the same influencers, buying the same boss babe courses, and starting to believe the same lies. The men there are poorer on average, so the shift is slower, but it's happening. 10 years from now, the good old days everyone talks about in Southeast Asia will be a memory, and the men who can will either leave for quieter corners or simply opt out locally. The only places still somewhat insulated are the ones with religious and cultural firewalls strong enough to slow the spread. Parts of the Middle East, ultra Orthodox communities, some rural pockets in Africa and South America. Everywhere else is on the same conveyor belt, just at different miles per hour. And here's the part governments are terrified to say out loud: every major modern economy is a Ponzi scheme that requires constant population growth to survive. Pensions, healthcare for the elderly, infrastructure maintenance, all of it was designed assuming each generation would be larger than the last. When you drop below replacement level, the math stops working. Japan has been trying to spend and borrow its way out of this problem for 30 years, and they're still losing 1 million people a year. Italy is closing schools and turning them into nursing homes because there are no children left. South Korea is throwing hundreds of billions at subsidies, tax breaks, and free housing for anyone who has a baby, and the fertility rate still fell again last quarter. The West is next in line, and the speed is accelerating. The United States Social Security Trust Fund is projected to be insolvent by 2034 under current trends. Europe's pension systems are even worse off. And the people who were supposed to be having the next generation of workers are instead arguing about who should text first and whether it's misogynistic to want a woman who cooks. Every proposed solution is either comical or tyrannical. Politicians float ideas like taxing single men extra. Good luck collecting that from guys who already left the country. They talk about government dating apps with verified income and fertility scores because nothing says romance like a state mandated compatibility algorithm. South Korea even floated the idea of paying women a bounty for every child. And the birth rate still went down because the core problem isn't money, it's trust. Women don't trust men to stick around after the check clears, and men don't trust the system not to destroy them the minute they sign the marriage certificate. Money can't fix a trust collapse. The corporate world is starting to feel it too. Industries that relied on male spending are bleeding out. Car companies that used to sell V8 muscle cars to 25-year-old guys now push electric crossovers to childless women who can't afford them. Video game companies that built fortunes on young male gamers are now lecturing those same gamers about inclusion and wondering why sales are in the toilet. Hollywood keeps churning out girl boss movies that lose hundreds of millions because the primary movie going demographic, young men, simply doesn't show up anymore. Streaming services are raising prices and adding ads because the disposable income that used to flow into entertainment is now going into crypto, gym memberships, and brokerage accounts controlled by men who no longer have a girlfriend, wife, or kids to support. Advertising agencies are quietly rewriting every campaign because the old tricks don't work. Shaming men into buying diamonds with "she deserves it" campaigns fell flat years ago. Guilt tripping men with "real men provide" messaging now gets laughed off the screen. The only ads that still move product to men are the ones that appeal to self respect, strength, and independence: gym equipment, tactical gear, tools, trucks, investment platforms. Everything else is background noise. And the most delicious irony of all, the same media outlets that spent 20 years telling men they were obsolete are now publishing panicked articles with headlines like "The End of Men" and "Why Won't Men Date Anymore?" They're paying psychologists to go on morning shows and diagnose millions of peaceful, productive men with maturity issues and avoidant attachment because the alternative, admitting the culture spent decades breaking the social contract, is too terrifying to contemplate. But the men aren't sick, They're awake. They looked at the world they were offered, ran the numbers, weighed the risks, and chose themselves. And once a man chooses himself at scale, once millions of men make the same choice, there is no policy, no shaming campaign, no viral crying video that can pull him back. The genie doesn't go back in the bottle. The horse doesn't return to the barn that's on fire. Women are starting to feel the cold wind of consequence, and the stages of grief are playing out in real time on every platform. First came denial. Fine, we don't need men anyway. Then anger. Men are trash. Men are weak. Men are afraid of strong women. Then bargaining. Okay, if men just start approaching again and paying for dates, we promise we'll be nicer. Then depression. The endless TikTok tears in cars at 2 a.m. And finally, for a tiny minority, the beginnings of acceptance. Women in their late 20s who are deleting the apps, losing the attitude, learning to cook, hitting the gym, and praying the damage isn't already permanent. But for most, acceptance will never come because acceptance would require admitting they were sold a lie and that millions of men they called losers were actually the smart ones all along. And ego is a hell of a drug. Now let's look 20, 30, 40 years down the road and paint the picture of the world we're actually building right now with every man who deletes the apps, every man who locks his money down, every man who chooses the gym and his brotherhood over drama and dysfunction. This isn't guesswork. This is what happens when you run the current trends all the way to their logical endpoint without intervention. And the crazy part is that no realistic intervention is coming. By 2040, the median age in most Western countries will be over 50. Think about that. Half the population will be old enough to collect full retirement benefits, and the other half will be trying to carry a tax burden that was designed for a population pyramid with a wide base and a narrow top. Except the pyramid is upside down now. There will be more people in diapers, adult and infant combined, than there are people paying income tax at the top rate. Entire towns in Italy, Spain, and rural America are already half empty. In 20 years, there'll be museum pieces with for sale signs on every third house, and nobody young enough to climb the stairs. Cities will split into two different species. You'll have the urban cores, where single, childless women in their 40s, 50s, and 60s cluster together, because that's where the jobs, the nightlife that never really was, and the government services are concentrated. Rents will be insane, crime will be constant, and the vibe will be a mix of desperation and forced cheer. Think Sex in the City, but everyone is 60 broke, and the cosmos are replaced with boxed wine and SSRIs. Suburbs and small towns will quietly become male enclaves, compounds, co living houses, trade shops, gyms, micro farms, and off grid retreats where groups of men in their 30s to 60s live low cost, high freedom lives surrounded by other men who share tools, skills, and security. Women will call them cults or incel compounds. Men will call them peace. Marriage will be a luxury good, like owning a supercar. Only the top 5% of men will bother, and they'll do it with ironclad prenups written in jurisdictions that actually enforce them, or they'll just stay permanently unmarried and keep a rotation of much younger girlfriends who understand the deal. The average man will look at marriage the same way he looks at playing Russian roulette with 5 bullets in a 6 shooter. Technically possible to survive, but why would you? Children will become so rare that having one biological kid will be treated like winning the lottery. Having three or more will make you a minor celebrity. Governments will pay massive bounties, 6 figures in today's money, for every verified birth. But it still won't move the needle because the core problem is cultural, not financial. Women will not suddenly decide to have children with men they don't respect, and men will not suddenly decide to have children with women who can destroy them on a whim. Money can't buy trust. That was deliberately annihilated. The economy will bifurcate hard. Anything that depends on discretionary female spending, fashion, cosmetics, destination weddings, luxury handbags, mid tier wine, will shrink into niche markets for the ultra rich. Anything that caters to male self improvement, security, and independence, tools, land, firearms, crypto, home gyms, overlanding gear, private education for the few kids who exist will explode. Trades will be the new doctor, lawyer path. A 25-year-old plumber with no debt and his own truck will out earn and out net worth a 40-year-old marketing manager with a master's degree and six figures of student loans. And he'll be happier doing it. Politics will get weird. Old women vote at much higher rates than young men. So the voting bloc of childless, retired, urban women will become the most powerful demographic in every Western country. Expect policies that sound like satire, but pass anyway. Bachelor taxes, mandatory civil service for single men, government surrogacy programs, UBI that's only paid if you don't have a Y chromosome. None of it will work, but they'll try everything short of admitting the real problem. Meanwhile, young men will simply drop off the grid, go gray, or leave the country entirely. Voter turnout among men under 40 will fall below 30% because they'll realize voting is just choosing which boot steps on your neck. Religion will make a roaring comeback, but not the watered down mainstream versions. High discipline, male centric faith communities, Orthodox Christianity, certain sects of Islam, traditionalist Catholic enclaves, even secular monk mode groups will be the only places where large families still happen at scale. There'll be self contained societies with their own schools, businesses, and security. The mainstream will call them extremists, they'll call themselves survivors. Technology will try to plug the gaps and fail. Artificial wombs, designer babies, sex robots, VR companions. Every billionaire is funding something that promises to make women obsolete or men unnecessary. None of it will scale fast enough or well enough to matter. You can't 3D print trust. You can't code loyalty. And even if the tech works perfectly, the men who could afford it will already be living on homesteads with their brothers, fishing and lifting, perfectly content without any of it. The biggest wild card is collapse speed. If the current trends hold straight, most Western economies hit the wall between 2045 and 2055. Debt becomes unpayable, pensions default, currencies hyperinflate, or get replaced overnight with central bank digital currencies that track every purchase and punish non compliant lifestyles. At that point, the urban female enclaves become dependent on government handouts that no longer exist, while the male compounds and rural holdouts become the only places with food, water, power, and security. History says those places become the seeds of whatever civilization comes next. History also says the people who spent decades mocking the men who prepared will suddenly remember those men's names when the lights go out. And here we are, back in 2025, still early enough that most people think this is just a phase. Most women still believe men will get bored of peace and come running back the moment the right pair of yoga pants walks by. Most politicians still think a few subsidies and shaming campaigns will fix everything. Most corporations still think men will eventually get lonely and start spending money on dates and OnlyFans again. They're all wrong. The men who walked away aren't coming back because there is nothing to come back to. The social contract is shredded. The trust is gone. The risk reward math is broken beyond repair. And most importantly, men finally discovered that life without all the noise is objectively better. Better sleep, better health, better finances, better brotherhood, better everything. You don't negotiate your way back into a burning building just because the people still inside start screaming for help. So if you're a man watching this and you're still on the fence, still trying to make it work with someone who treats you like a utility, still hoping that if you just try harder, she'll finally respect you, hear me clearly. The exit door is still open, but it's closing. Every year you wait, the standards get higher. The peace gets deeper for the men already out, and the chaos gets louder for everyone who stayed. Choose yourself before the choice is made for you. And if you're a woman watching this and feeling that cold knot in your stomach, understand something. Nobody is coming to save you from the world you helped build. The men you called toxic aren't hiding. They're free. The men you said you didn't need aren't broken. They're whole. And the life you were promised, if you just followed the script, isn't late. It's never arriving. The only question left is what you're going to do with the years you have left. What did you think about all this? Do you agree? Do you see it playing out in your own city, your own friend group, your own family? Drop a comment below and let me know where you're watching from and what you're seeing on the ground. Real talk only. Like the video if it hit hard. Don't forget to subscribe for more. Share it with every man who needs to hear the truth today. And just remember, all roads lead to MWA. Men walking away. Cheers.
Nothing says you care like crypto. Nothing can compare. Nothing says you care like crypto. Oh, nothing can compare to crypto.